In a town shaped by the subtle machinations and political intrigue of its guilds, it's reassuring to see a goblin waving his torch and screaming about some nonsense or other.
Hey gang, using the promo code MTGMudsta, one word, all caps, will get you 10% off orders of $10 or more at Flipside Gaming, Original Magic Art, and orders of singles at Multizone. If they don't have what you're looking for, you could check out TCG Player and use my affiliate link to help support the channel. Looking for a way to bling out your deck and not spend a fortune? Alter Sleaze can help with that, and you can help with the channel at the same time by using my affiliate link. Or, if you're looking to join the Goblin Gang, you can always support me through Patreon. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's game is a bit of an old one, filmed at GP Montreal in 2019. First up, we have Armin playing his stock list / slightly changed Anya deck, keeping a Chainer, Malevolent Whispers, Swamp, Cinder Barons, Rakdos Guildgate, Mob, and Anya's Ravager. Jan from the Spike Feeders is playing his Edgar Markov deck, which is also equally changed, and he keeps a Rakish Hare, Rakdos Signet, Sol Ring, Drana Calestria Bloodchief, Terramorphic Expanse, Opal Palace, and Bloodfell Caves. Tim, who's also new to the channel, has also brought a slightly altered Precon deck, playing Kadena and keeping an Urborg, an Enoch Survivalist, an Island, Sudden Substitution, Gift of Doom, Forest, and Sunken Hollow. And I'm happy to say that Vincent joined us for this game as well, playing his Rakdos Neheb deck. He keeps a Dowsing Dagger, an Ancient Tomb, a Hazoret's Monument, a Path of Ancestry, an Anger, a Canyon Slough, and a Taurian Mauler. Vincent wins the die roll and starts us off. Vincent draws and plays a tap Path of Ancestry. Tim plays an Urborg. Jan plays an Opal Palace and then casts Sol Ring. He taps the Sol Ring for a Rakdos Signet and passes. Armin plays a tap Cinder Barons. Vincent plays an Ancient Tomb and then loses 2 to cast a Taurian Mauler. He scries 1 from the path and bottoms it. Tim draws and plays an Island. He casts a Talisman of Curiosity, passing. Jan plays a Terramorphic Expanse and casts a Cordial Vampire. With this being cast, Jan gets a token from Edgar's Eminence ability. He then casts the Rakish Hare, getting another token. Armin plays a tapped Rakdos Guildgate, passing. Vincent plays a tapped Spinerock Knoll and hides away a card. He then avoids taking damage by tapping his Tomb for black thanks to Urborg, and he casts a Dowsing Dagger. He gives the plant tokens to Tim, and passes. Tim plays a Forest, and we see a morph creature hitting the field. Jan draws and plays an Evolving Wilds. He taps out entirely for Edgar Markov, and Vincent is making sure this time around to add counters to his Mauler since he missed the first few spells. Moving to combat, Edgar goes at Vincent, the tokens and air go at Tim, and the Cordial Vampire goes at Armin. He gets the on-attack trigger, putting a +1/+1 counter onto each vampire he controls. Vincent then takes 5 commander damage, while Tim takes 7, and Armin takes 2. With the vampires dealing damage, this triggers the Rakish Hare, giving each of them another +1/+1 counter. Armin plays a Reliquary Tower, and casts Anya. The Mauler gets another counter, and Armin then passes. Vincent takes 2 to equip the dagger onto the Mauler. He swings it at Jan, dealing 7 as it connects, and then transforms the Dowsing Dagger into the Lost Veil. He then casts a Demonic Tutor, and has some mana still floating as he goes to find a card. He then counts up the creatures on board, and casts a Blasphemous Act to wipe them all away. In response, Armin activates Anya, discarding a card and drawing 1. Vincent then still has 2 black floating from the Veil, and he cycles a Canyon Slough to draw a card. Tim draws and plays a Sunken Hollow, which comes in untapped, and he passes to Jan. Jan plays a tapped Bloodfell Caves, gaining 1 life as it enters. He then casts Drana and gets a Vampire token from the Eminence ability before passing to Armin. Armin plays a Swamp and passes. Vincent loses another 2 in his main phase as he casts a Solemn Simulacrum to go and find a basic. He shortcuts first, tapping the Veil for black to cast a Phyrexian Arena, and passes, searching for a land. Tim plays a Waterlogged Grove as his land for turn, and taps it for black along with the rest of his lands to help cast Kadena. With his commander out, he gets to cast a Morph creature for free, and draws a card as it enters, passing. Jan taps enough in his main phase to use Strana's ability, giving Kadena -0/-3, but Tim is ready with the Willbender. He changes the target to Drana herself, which results in her becoming a 7/1 until end of turn. Jan's still fine with this, and ends up dealing 7 to Vincent in the air. Jan's second main phase then has him playing out a Boros Garrison, bouncing a land back to hand, and passing. Armin draws and moves to his end step. He discards Alchemist's Greeting because he has too many cards in hand, and as he does so, pays the Madness cost. He gets to deal 4 to Drana, which takes her out. Vincent's turn has him losing 1 to the arena, drawing from it, and then for turn. He taps the Tomb for black, and then taps enough for Hazoret's Monument. He's able to use the 2 red floating he still has to cast a Rageblood Shaman, and gets a Monument trigger. This has Vincent discarding Anger and then drawing a card. At this point, Jan decides to crack his Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic to go and find basics, and moving to combat, the Rageblood goes at Jan for 2. After combat, Vincent then casts in his second main phase for 1 red, Light Up the Stage, and exiles his 2 cards until the end of the next turn. He then passes to Tim. Tim plays Shrine of the Forsaken Gods and casts his free Morph, drawing as it enters. He then plays out Sakura Tribe Elder before passing turn. Jan just casts a Vampire Nighthawk in his main phase, gaining a Vampire token from the Eminence trigger, and passing Armin. Armin plays a tap Leadfell Gaves, gaining 1 as it enters, and he casts Anya's Ravager, passing to Vincent. Vincent loses 1 on his upkeep, and draws from the arena, and then for turn. He casts the Oracle of Bones from exile, and discards a card to the monument, and then draws 1. At this point, Tim also sacrifices his Elder to go and find a basic, and as the Oracle comes in, Tim has the tribute response by giving it counters and not the free spell. Vincent then plays an unclaimed territory, naming Minotaurs, and puts to stack a Fellhide Spiritbinder. He gets another Monument trigger, discarding a card and drawing 1. He then casts a Fellhide Petrifier, and discards again, drawing 1. Moving to combat, the Oracle hits Armin, and Vincent then passes. Tim plays his free Morph for turn, drawing as it enters, and loses 2 life to the Phyrexian mana cost of Tezzeret's Gambit, drawing 2 cards. Tim then casts a Seedborn Muse, and passes to Jan. Tim untaps with Jan, and Jan plays a Swamp for turn. He taps a good chunk of mana to recast Edgar Markov, and uses the Opal Palace's ability as he does so, and this time Edgar Markov comes in with 2 +1/+1 counters. Jan then goes to combat, swinging the Nighthawk and Edgar at Vincent. This gives his vampires another +1/+1 counter as he attacks, and before moving to blocks, Tim uses Reality Shift to exile the Fellhide Petrifier, and Vincent manifests his top card. Vincent then blocks Edgar with a Solemn, and takes 3 in the air, with Jan gaining 3 life. Vincent also draws from the Solemn dying, and Jan then passes. Armin draws and is a bit behind in lands. He casts Greven in his main phase and goes to combat. He has to attack with the Ravager and goes at Vincent. This triggers the Ravager's on-attack ability, discarding Armin's hand and drawing him 3. Vincent then just takes the hit, and Armin passes. Vincent loses 1 to the arena, drawing from it, and for turn. He plays a Maze of Ith as his land for turn, and then taps enough mana to put to stack a Kindred Dominance. He picks Minotaurs, and wipes the board of everything but. Tim responds, morphing up his Gift of Doom by sacrificing a creature, and attaches it onto the Seedborn Muse. Once that's done, Vincent brings out his commander, scrying 1 from tapping the path to help pay for it, and then discarding a card and drawing 1 from the Monument trigger. Heading to combat, he swings 13 at Jan, some of which is commander, and he passes turn. Tim taps enough to recast Kadena in his main phase, and plays a free Morph. he draws as it enters and plays out a Llanowar Wastes. He then hardcasts a morph creature, drawing as it enters as well. Tim then swings the Seedborn Muse at Vincent, who takes the hit. Tim untaps with Jan, and Jan casts Fell the Mighty, picking the morph creature on Vincent's side as the target. The board is mostly wiped, and Jan then casts an Asylum Visitor, getting a Vampire token, and passing. Armin plays a Swamp for turn and recasts his commander. He then just passes. Vincent loses 1 to the arena and plays a Swamp for turn. He pays 3 for Mirage Mirror and passes. Tim casts a morph creature in his main phase, and then plays out Thespian Stage as his land for turn. He goes at Vincent with the Seedborn Muse, and Vincent blocks the Manifest creature, which we see was a Fanatic Amogus. Tim then passes, and untaps with Jan. Jan gets his Asylum Visitor trigger, losing 1 and drawing from it for having no cards in hand. He then draws for turn. He plays a Mountain and casts Skull Clamp. This is then equipped onto the Vampire token, with Jan drawing 2. One of them must have been a Falconwrath Exterminator because it hits the stack and gets Jan another Vampire token. He clamps that new token as well, drawing 2 more. Jan then plays out a Tithe Drinker, getting his 3rd token for turn. He passes, and at the end of turn, Armin activates Anya and discards a Fiery Temper. He pays the Madness cost, dealing 3 to Vincent, and then untaps Anya and draws a card. Armin draws for turn and casts a Hedron Archive. He pays 3 for a Plaguecrafter, and everyone has to sacrifice a creature. Responding to this when he gets a chance to, Tim megamorphs Silumgar Assassin to take out the Minotaur on Vincent's side of the board. Everyone then has to sacrifice a creature, and Armin then swings the Plaguecrafter at Vincent, since Anger is in his yard. Vincent decides to untap it with a Maze to prevent the damage, and Armin passes. Vincent loses 1 to the arena and draws from it. He plays a Ghost Quarter and puts to stack Living Death. Tim gets priority first, and counters it with a Megamorph from Stratus Dancer. Vincent then casts a Kragma Warcaller, scrying 1 from using the path. He bottoms it, and at the end of turn, Tim morphs face up his Icefeather Aven to bounce the Minotaur back to Vincent's hand. Tim draws for turn and goes to combat. He swings all of his creatures at Vincent, who uses his Maze of Ith to untap the Seedborn Muse, taking the rest. Tim then passes. Jan plays a Swamp for turn and looks at the Seedborn Muse and the gift. He does some quick math with lands and casts Sorin, Imperious Bloodlord. He upticks Sorin using his first ability to give the Exterminator Death Touch, Lifelink, and because it's a vampire, a +1/+1 counter. He swings it at Vincent, who knows he's going out, so Vincent activates Ghost Quarter and destroys the Thespian Stage before damage is dealt. Jan then clamps the Exterminator in his second main phase, and passes. Armin plays a Magus of the Wheel in his main phase, and then casts Endling, passing to Tim. Tim draws for turn, and taps enough for Kadena again. He then swings a Stratus Dancer and Icefeather at Jan, and before damage is dealt, Jan deals enough with the Exterminator's ability to take out the Icefeather Aven, and then does it again, this time taking out the Dancer. Tim untaps with Jan, and Jan draws for turn. He casts Blade of the Bloodchief, and gears up the Exterminator. Jan then upticks Sorin to give the Exterminator lifelink, Death Touch, and give it another +1/+1 counter. He then activates it to deal damage to the Plaguecrafter, gaining life, and gets to put 2 +1/+1 counters onto it because of the Blade of the Bloodchief. Jan then activates it again to try and take out the Endling, but before the ability resolves, Armin taps 1 black to give the Endling Undying. It still dies, but comes back, and Jan gets the life and gives the Exterminator the counters, plus the Endling comes back with a +1/+1 counter. Jan then passes turn. In Armin's main phase, he casts the Eldest Reborn, adding a lore counter as it comes in. With the sacrifice ability on the stack, Jan casts Go for the Throat on Kadena, but Tim responds once he can to cast a sudden substitution. He exchanges Armin's Magus of the Wheel for the spell, and this means that Armin gets to pick the target now. Armin has it take out the Exterminator, and Jan then sacrifices the Magus to the Saga, and Tim sacrifices Kadena. Moving to combat, the Endling goes at Jan. who blocks with a Tithe Drinker. This has Jan gain some life, and Armin passes. Tim just draws and passes. Jan's turn has him tapping 4 and an untapped vampire to cast New Blood. He tries to steal away the Seedborn Muse, but Tim uses Echoing Truth to bounce it back to his hand. Jan then upticks Soren to give the Asylum Visitor a counter, and passes. On Armin's upkeep, because he has no cards in hand, Jan's Visitor triggers, and Jan draws a card and loses 1 life. Then, after Armin's draw step, he adds the second lore counter to the saga, and each of his opponents discards a card. Armin then goes to combat, swinging the Endling at Soren, and pumps it with its ability to make it big enough to take Soren out. Armin then passes, and at the end of turn, Tim flashes out a Great Oak Guardian. Tim draws and goes to combat, swinging the Great Oak Guardian at Armin before passing to Jan. Jan draws and plays a mountain. He has enough to recast Edgar Markov again, once more using the Opal Palace. This has Edgar come in with 3 +1/+1 counters, and Jan then plays out an Orzhov Signet, and then pays to equip Edgar with a Clamp and the Blade. He swings both creatures at Armin, putting a +1/+1 counter onto each of his creatures as he does. Armin then takes the hit, and Jan passes, with Armin sacrificing his Hedron Archive at the end of turn to draw 2. Armin's draw step has the final counter going onto his saga, and he gets to bring back a creature or planeswalker from the graveyard to the field. He settles on the Champion of the Stray Souls, and then plays a mountain in his main phase. He passes to Tim. Tim draws and counts up his mana. He taps it all for a Hooded Hydra where X is 9, and passes turn. Jan loses 1 to his Asylum Visitor on his upkeep, drawing from it, and then drawing for turn. He casts a Dark Impostor, and gets a Vampire token from the Eminence trigger. He then plays out Maverin Fane, getting another token from Eminence. He then activates the Dark Impostor's ability to exile the Hydra. Moving to combat, he goes at Armin, and gets a Vampire token from Maverin Fane, plus gives all of his vampires a +1/+1 counter from Edgar attacking. Armin blocks like so, and before damage is dealt, activates the champion by sacrificing the Endling and paying the needed mana cost, and brings back the Magus of the Wheel. Jan gets counters on Edgar for the Blade triggers, and he then passes turn. At the end of turn, Armin uses Magus of the Wheel, and everyone discards their hand and draws 7. Armin untaps and draws. He plays a mountain for turn, and looks at Tim's graveyard. Armin then plays a Boneyard Parlay, which I think is the first time I've ever seen the spell resolve. He exiles 5 creatures from his opponent's graveyards, and has Tim make 2 piles. Armin takes the pile with the Seedborn Muse, and passes to Tim. Armin untaps with Tim, and Tim draws and plays a Bojuka Bog, exiling Jan's graveyard. He plays a Thieving Amalgam, and then casts a Thran Dynamo. With the rest of his mana, he casts a Scaretiller, and passes. At the end of turn, Armin uses Drana to take out the Dark Impostor, which in turn makes Edgar bigger because of the Blade of the Bloodchiefs. Jan untaps, and Tim manifests his top card. He draws for turn, and plays a tap Forsaken Sanctuary. Patron of the Vein hits the stack, and triggers Eminence, bringing another Vampire token on his side of the board. The Patron then enters, and Jan puts the target ability on Drana. Armin responds once he gains priority, using Drana to take out the Patron in mutually assured destruction. This has Edgar Markov continue to grow because of the Blade. Jan then casts a Vicious Conquistador, gaining another token, and plays out a Sanctum Seeker, gaining another one. Moving to combat, Jan swings his team at Armin, -1 token who goes at Tim. This has the Sanctum Seeker draining his opponents for that much, while Jan gains that much, not to mention pumps the board after getting another Vampire token from Maverin Fane. Armin blocks like this but gets taken out, and Jan gains some life, passing to Tim. Tim plays a Castle Garenbrig, and then casts a Vesuvan Shapeshifter, having it come in as a copy of a Thieving Amalgam, and passes to Jan. Tim manifests Jan's top 2 cards from his Amalgam triggers, and Jan draws for turn. He casts an Indulgent Aristocrat, gaining a token, and then casts Anawan the Ruin Sage, getting a second token for the turn. He moves to combat, swinging the team at Tim, who is drained by the Sanctum Seeker for 10, and Jan gains 10. He also makes a token with Maverin Fane, before finally putting a +1/+1 counter onto all of his vampires from Edgar Markov attacking. Tim then blocks what he can, but is pretty sure he's done for. Jan says he'll sacrifice what's blocked to the Indulgent to pump the rest of the board, and Tim graciously concedes the game to Jan. Game review time. So I think the table did a pretty good job of recognizing that Vincent, who was the only one there who wasn't playing a precon basically, was the biggest threat, and dealt with him accordingly. His deck can actually get pretty out of control, and as you saw, with the Hazoret's Monument and other things, he was filtering through a lot of his library very quickly. I'm always impressed by a Cadena deck, and so it's no surprise that I love Tim's. It was especially sweet to see a morph creature which you always wonder if it's a willbender actually be a willbender. I think unfortunately Armin was the weakest link at the table, and his Anya deck didn't really seem to get off until he had some lands, and by that point it was pretty late game. Madness is a pretty sweet deck, but I think with the precon you need to add a couple more cards to really have it go off. And a big thank you to Jan from the Spike Feeders for bringing his Edgar Markov deck. He added some new vampires to it and a couple cards, but basically left the mana base the same. And it just goes to show you don't need to have a top-notch super expensive mana base to be able to do fun things. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/mtgmudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/mtgmudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.